Hello and welcome to Season 8, Episode 8 of the Data Governance Podcast. I'm so glad you've come to join me for this one because I had a brilliant chat with Dennis Kessler, who in the preparation for this podcast episode said that just brilliant phrase of doing data governance well is not the goal. So I don't think he actually said it when we actually did the conversation for real, but he's shared so many gems. So let's dive in and hear what he has to say. Welcome, Dennis.
Thank you so much, Nicola. It's a great pleasure to be here. And can I just say, huge fan. I've been following you for far more years than we've actually been making face-to-face contact. So it's a real pleasure to be here, and keep up the good work, of course.
Thank you very much. Well, we were lucky enough to be on a panel together earlier in the year, and I just loved what you were sharing, which is why I wanted to get you on the podcast so that my audience could hear your gems of wisdom as well. So now I alluded in the introduction that you've been working in data governance for a considerable amount of time. So it just kind of, it's the one question I love to ask all my guests is how long have you been in data governance? But really interesting, how did you get into it? Because some people view it as an unusual career choice.
So I'm gonna say something completely unoriginal, which you've heard so many people give the same answer when you've asked them that question, which is that it wasn't a choice I made, and I just stumbled into it. It was the forces of nature and the furies that directed me here. The background that led me into explicit data governance management and leadership roles was information governance, which is the sort of daddy of data governance. If we accept that structured data is a subset of the overall challenge of seeing information as an asset of an organization, I came from a background with 10, 12 years in data governance. Before that, far more years in enterprise content management and information governance, which covers document management, records management, all of that stuff where people like us have got all the scars to show for all those battles we went through trying to make the world a better place and trying to help our clients and employers get the house in order. And what that means is whether it's information, whether it's documents, whether it's records, whether it's data, there's an overall goal. If we talk about managing something as an asset, we need to start with what does the end game look like? What's the stuff we're dealing with? And what do we have? How are we going to value it? Before we can start to talk about managing it, we need to identify and agree with our stakeholders, what is this stuff? Where are we today and where are we trying to get to?
And I think that's so true. It doesn't matter whether we're talking about documents, records, or whether individual data, it's the same mindset. So you were clearly the right mindset to come into data governance. So one thing I'm always interested in is, because I do think that the people that I have seen that have been the most successful at data governance do have certain characteristics. So I wanted to ask you, what characteristics do you have that make you successful at data governance, and why do you think that is?
I think the first thing that's really important is that I'm really uninterested in technology. I did an IT degree at university, not out of any enthusiasm for it, but because I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I did know I wanted to work on interesting projects with a lot of variety, and I wanted to travel. And I feel that I've been vindicated by my ambivalence towards technology itself, because I've never ever seen any proper business problem being solved by throwing some technology at it. I see technology in the same way as I see my hi-fi system, and I've got a really nice vintage hi-fi system. I don't care how it works. I only care what it gives me. All I want is to hear fantastic music sounding as good as it possibly can. And the stuff the components I've acquired, mostly on eBay, are simply trying to achieve that goal of improving the quality of the music that's being reproduced. So the thing that is really important, that is always overlooked, is nothing to do with any magic with data governance or information governance. It's all about people, and it's all about change management. And I know this may sound a little bit boring because there's nothing new in what I've just said, but it just constantly amazes me how much money organizations will spend on introducing fancy new infrastructure, and they just expect that if they acquire the right kit and they have the right consultancy contracts and they have all this fancy new stuff that they introduce, that somehow the silos will be magically broken down and people will just naturally be drawn to using the new systems without any consideration for what the impact is on changing the way they're working.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you've demonstrated one of your good characteristics there is you're very good with analogies. I love that one about the hi-fi system and the music, because you're right, we don't do data governance. And you said it in the prep call is, doing data governance well is not the aim, is not the goal. And I think that's true, in the same way, you don't buy a hi-fi system because you want a hi-fi system that's newer and shinier than the old one. You buy the bits you buy to give you better quality music, and that's what people have to think about is, that was for your enjoyment and that's the value you get out of it. What value are they getting out of doing data governance? I was reviewing a data strategy for a client last week, and that was actually my whole feedback. It's always saying it felt like the whole document was saying we should do data governance because it's best practice. And again, no, we should be doing data governance because it adds some business value, solves some problems. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So
excellent.
one thing I just want to add is that you'd mentioned the time at Amazon. I left Amazon last year uh, after nearly 2 years there. There was one thing that I encourage people to follow up on. I never expected to work for Amazon. And I learned a great deal. I worked with some super smart people. There's one thing that Amazon is brilliant at, and that is they have these 16 publicly published and publicly available leadership principles. And they're nothing to do with technology. They're all about delivering results, being brave, embracing risks. And one of the most important is building trust. And the company prides itself with its customer obsession, but it promotes this very strong culture of having internal customers and being equally obsessed with building trust with your stakeholders. And that reflects this recognition that in order to get anything meaningful done, it's not just about you and how clever you think you are or the great idea that you've had. In order to deliver meaningful change and actually make a change that actually sticks as opposed to just does something this month, you have to engage with other people that have different priorities than yours. And the only way that that works is by building trust with them. So there's a great deal of training and a great deal of performance management on how well you are building and maintaining trust-based relationships with your stakeholders. And that was something really important that I've seen missing in other organizations. And also, I haven't always done really well myself, which was a great lesson. For me, that's a really important success factor in any data governance management role.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Dennis. And I think I like your honesty there and sharing that, perhaps it's something, and to be fair, it was something that I probably learned along the way as well. So I was wondering, is there anything else that particularly wish you'd known when you were just starting out in data governance, when we're naive and think it's all really easy?
Yeah, I had this idea that I was constantly being judged, which I was, and which everyone is, especially when they come into a new role. You've got a certain amount of time to prove yourself. People are generally very forgiving and very understanding and very supportive. But the, the thing that I wish I'd understood sooner is that I'm not being judged on my knowledge of data governance that comes out of textbooks and training courses. I'm not being judged by how much of an expert I sound like when I'm making a little speech in a meeting. There was a mentor that I had at the EIB, the European Investment Bank, which, by the way, is the investment bank financing and funding arm of the European Union. And this was one of my mentors who actually had a background working for AXA in Brussels. He taught me something universal. He was a really, really wise, interesting, unusual guy. He told me that there are only three things when you walk into a room, you've tried to get time with a busy stakeholder who's an important decision maker, whose support you need to get something done. You need that person on board. When you walk in that room, the clock is ticking. And no matter how much they're smiling, the clock is ticking and they're waiting to hear something. Now, I thought they were waiting to hear, can I trust this person to be competent and be like an expert and help us do data governance? That was wrong. What I learned, what my mentor taught me, was there are only three things that person wants to hear. What's in it for me? What's in it for me? And what's in it for me? And the reason is the thing that I didn't understand earlier in my career is that no matter how senior people are in the hierarchy, in the food chain, everyone is under performance management constraints. Everyone is seeking to advance in their careers. Everyone is short of budget. Everyone has less budget than they had asked for, and everyone has fewer people and fewer resources than they want to try to achieve what they're there to achieve. Therefore, when we walk in the door saying, great news, I'm here and I'm going to do data governance and I'm going to do it to you and I'm going to do it really, really well, and you're going to see how much I know. All they're hearing is, this person risks disrupting me and my people and interfering with the priorities that we're already struggling to meet. So the only thing they care about is, are the changes that this person's here to sell me going to help me to achieve my goals or not? And if it's not, then the best you can hope for is that they're volunteering to do things in their spare time. What we're aiming for is to try to get the changes that we want to introduce to be part of the process of their daily work and part of the goals that help them to achieve what they're aiming for.
I think that is such great advice and so well put. So thank you. I think everybody needs to remember that that is all that everybody's interested in. They're not interested in how well we can do data governance. It's how we're going to help them. So I love that. Now, we obviously don't have very long interview podcasts on my particular show. But one thing I know that you are a bit of an expert in is AI. Now, there's a lot of interest in AI amongst data governance people, rightly so. So I wanted to use the time we got left to ask you on your advice, what advice you'd have for people who are perhaps doing data governance, but they know that their organization is also embracing AI at the same time.
Yeah, so this is a great question, and there's a strong synergy between the goals of data governance. And there's one thing to make clear, is that you and I both know this, but it's not obvious to everyone and even to our stakeholders. The data governance is not one thing. It's a collection of data management activities and standards and disciplines, all of which together contribute to something we could describe as managing data as an asset. Now, the goal of that always is to make sure that the right people have access to the right data that fulfills the right quality, and it's just everything that everyone needs for business purposes. It shouldn't be more complicated than that. How to achieve it and how to maintain it is where life gets interesting, but those are the high level principles. Now, along comes AI, which many people don't realize has actually been knocking around for quite a long time. The reason why it's exploded into our consciousness is because the tools for generative AI have suddenly become much more affordable as computing power has increased and as data sets have increased in volume, not necessarily quality. And so suddenly we've got Claude from Anthropic and ChatGPT with the GPT-4 behind it. So these tools are not just on our desktops, but on our phones. But what about the companies that are producing AI applications? When we're doing data governance, the minimum that organizations are trying to invest in is to minimize risk, because they've discovered that not having the house in order when it comes to data involves risk of cost, risk to reputations, all sorts of horror stories when data is not being managed right. Now, when companies are developing AI applications, the opportunities for saving costs and increasing automation and insights and innovation, they're all there. But together with that comes a whole new world of risks. Now, new regulations have been introduced in response to the recognition that there are lots and lots of risks associated with things not being done right. That can range from autonomous vehicles, right? Who decides how well a self-driving car has to work before it's safe for
Mm.
people to buy it in and use it in self-driving mode on public roads. There have been cases where visual, well-intentioned facial recognition systems have had horrible outcomes. With the best of intentions, people have ended up in jail for crimes that they didn't commit, not because the technology was at fault, but because the people using it, i.e., the police in some cases, were not understanding what it did and didn't do safely. So the thing I wanted to highlight is that the EU's newly introduced new Artificial Intelligence Act tries to tackle those risks by categorizing them into general purpose, high risk, and even prohibited systems in terms of what they're designed to do. So the kind of social credit scoring that has been deployed by the government in China is prohibited in the EU. You can't use AI tools to gather and score points against people that will lead to them being deprived of public services. High risk AI involves anything to do with education, anything to do with recruitment, anything to do with recognizing people's emotions in order to provide them with services or to let them do or not do things. Those things are not prohibited, but there are very strict conditions which have to be fulfilled in order for those things to be able to be used legally. And it's explicitly stated in the EU's AI Act that you have to have a well-documented, well-implemented data governance framework that's in place if you want to deploy one of these high-risk AI applications. The specific reason is that you need that in order to have data quality measures which detect and prevent the kind of bias that that has crept into AI models in the past that has led to harmful outcomes. And a harmful outcome can range from harms to an individual, racism, misogyny, or even harms to an organization or an institution or society in general. So we could go on for a very long time going into the details, but I know we don't have time. But that's it's generally understood and explicitly recognized that data governance and data quality are prerequisites for certain categories of AI applications to be developed and deployed legally in the EU. And the UK and the US are following similar principles and approaches.
Wow. So I mean, that's really good news just as a member of the public, I suppose. But for all data governance professionals, that really means that if your organization is embracing an AI at the moment, you need to go and talk to them and make sure that the data they want to use in their application is covered by your data governance framework and is good enough data quality.
Exactly. Everyone is familiar with the problem, the FOMO acronym, the fear of missing out. And there are too many examples of a lot of money that's been spent on developing AI applications where the prime motivation was just keeping up with the competitor and not wanting to be left behind, as opposed to identifying a very, very clear use case and then taking the next steps, which is identifying if we want to produce this model, how do we work backwards to understand what processes and what data need to go in as inputs? And then that leads us to another acronym cliche, garbage in, garbage out. If you've got rubbish data that's being fed into your model, you can't expect to have the kind of reliable outputs that will be safe to deploy for your customers or for the public.
I think that is a very sobering but very important point, probably one to probably bring the podcast to an ending because I really don't want people to forget that. It's really all about making sure that you have the right data and it's good enough quality in your AI. So I think that has been really fascinating talking to you, Dennis. I think we've got so much more we could talk about that I probably have to have you come back again in a future season to perhaps tell me more about what's going on in the AI space as it starts to develop, because obviously the EU AI Act is only just starting to come into force, isn't it? So I
Yeah.
think there's going to be some interesting things coming along.
Just one final word. If anyone is really interested in this area, the IAPP, the International Association of Privacy Practitioners, has an excellent training and certification program, which leads to the AI governance practitioner certification. And that's nothing to do with the EU. It covers all different regulatory frameworks, and it goes into some detail of the way in which a good AI application should be planned and developed and tested and implemented. And one of the things it emphasizes is the importance of having different kinds of people with different mindsets, not just technical people and data scientists involved in each stage of the development of those projects. And it also does a good job at a high level of comparing the principles behind the different regulatory frameworks and good practices. So even if you're not intending to become a full-time AI governance professional, it's a very good way, a very accessible way to get a handle on what does it actually mean to be developing, what are the implications, and what does it mean for an organization to decide to invest in developing and maintaining an AI application.
That is great advice. Thank you so much, Dennis. And yeah, I hope I get to be on a panel again with you soon, and we'll definitely have you back on the podcast in the future. Thank you so much.
Great pleasure, Nicola. Nice to speak with you. Bye.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Dennis as much as I did. I think it may be one of those ones that you might want to go and listen, make notes. But hey, that's up to you. But either way, I hope you'll come and join me next week when I'm doing one of my little bite-sized episodes. And we're going to explore whether data science and data governance are related disciplines. I hope you'll join me then.